The next principle I call giving up your personal history. And I learned it from a man named Carlos Castaneda, who once said that one day, he said, I finally realized that I no longer needed a personal history. And just like drinking, he said, I gave it up. And that, and only that, has made all the difference in the world. You know the nice thing about giving up your personal history? Is that if you don't have a story, you don't have to live up to it. All of us have these bags of manure that we carry around with us, called our past, and the people who have done things to us, and the events and the circumstances, all of this stuff that we use and we bond to. And we bond ourselves to these wounds of our past, and we identify ourselves on the basis of these wounds. And every once in a while we set it down and we reach in there and we smear it all over ourselves. And then we wonder, why does my life smell so bad? I don't understand this. When in fact, the now, this moment, merging yourself into the now, means that you may have been in a relationship. I had a woman from Holland who came over to see me, whose husband had left her after 25 years. She had 4 children, and she just had been on the verge of suicide. And she was losing weight, and she was depressed, and she was taking all kinds of drugs for it, and she was getting sicker and sicker because she just couldn't get over it. And she came to a book signing that I was doing at a bookstore down in Florida. And she said, you've got to say something to me. You've got to say something to me that will help me to get over this. And I told her this line. I said, give up your personal history. Merge yourself here, now, into this moment. And those 25 years are something, if you want to understand how to do it, think of your past as, oh, this hat. And this is your past. Now, you can't just set this thing down over here and walk away from it and give up your personal history, because you'll always have it there to look back at. What you do is you pick up your past and you embrace it. You understand it, you accept it as, I had to go through these things that I had to go through in order for me to get to this place today, and the evidence for that is that I did. You don't need any more evidence. You did. And then you toss it. You toss it. You embrace it and you toss it. And you merge into the now by giving up your attachment. And some of you have heard me use the metaphor of the wake. Alan Watts talked about the wake is not what drives the boat. The wake is just a trail that is left behind. That's all it is. And so is the wake of your life. And the wake doesn't make the boat go, and neither does the wake of your life, the reason why your life is going in the direction that it is. The wake is a trail that is left behind, and it's an illusion to believe that it is the cause of your suffering or your struggles or your difficulty. Give it up. Let it go. Embrace it, understand it, get help doing that if you must, and then move into the now. The next principle I call, it's from a line of Albert Einstein. He said, you can't solve a problem with the same mind that created it. In order to work at solving these things called problems in your life, you have to change your mind. It is your mind where they live. It is your mind that created them. There is where you experience them. They're all illusions. You must change your mind. Literally rewrite your agreement with reality. One of the things I had said earlier is that one of the most difficult things to do in the world is to admit that you were wrong. Admitting that you were wrong is nothing more than saying, I have been making choices with my mind that have created things in my life that are not working. And I no longer intend to continue making those choices. I was wrong. You don't have to make a declaration of it. You don't have to go out and feel guilty about it. You just simply say, it didn't work. The relationship that I was in before, I behaved in these ways. I didn't realize that it wasn't working for me. Now I do, and this is where I choose to be now. The secret of a successful relationship is, to me, understanding that you put your attention and your energy in a person on what you love rather than what you don't love. Robert Frost said it so beautifully. We love the things we love for what they are. For what they are. Not for what they ought to be, not for what they used to be, but for what they are. So when you look into the eyes of a person you're in a relationship with, whether it's your children, you catch them doing things right as much as you possibly can. That's oftentimes takes a lot of hunting, but you'll find it. And when you think that my relationship isn't working, remember, it's in my mind. What am I thinking about that person? And if I could just change my mind and put my thoughts on what I love about this person and keep them there, that makes the relationship flourish. And there are people who go through their entire relationship history with no anger, no hatred, no bitterness, and only love. The next principle is, I call it treating yourself as if you already were what you would like to become. In other words, you get out in front of your life and you see yourself as having already what you know you'd like to have and deserve to have. My children know how to do this perfectly. I have a daughter who wanted a prom dress, and the prom dress was way outside the budget that I thought a prom dress should be. Well, I thought a prom dress shouldn't cost over $20, so I do have a problem, right? But I upped it to somewhere around $250. I don't know how much, whatever. To me, it was still more than I paid for my first house, okay? But at any rate, she called and said, Dad, this is the only prom dress I could wear. I've got to wear this prom dress. If I don't wear this prom dress, it's just on and on and on with this wonderful. You know, I saw a wonderful book about how to raise teenage daughters. The title of it is Get Out of My Life, but first drive me and Cheryl to the mall. All right, that's the actual title. It's a good book. And so I told Serena, I said, it's just beyond the budget. I've got a certain amount of money that I'm willing to put for it. And she said, but I've already seen myself wearing it. I've already tried it on. I have a picture of myself in the dress in my living room, and I've already showed it to the guy who's taking me to the prom. I mean, it was this whole thing about, and she already saw herself in it. I said, well, if you see yourself in it, then you're going to have to also see yourself as earning the difference between what I'm willing to pay. And she drew up a contract. She went onto the computer, and on the background of the computer, you know, where they have these little background things they put on, there was 500 pictures of the dress, all right? And she signed a contract and said, I'll babysit, I'll do this, I'll do that, and I will pay the difference. And she did, and she wore the dress, because she understood that you treat yourself as if you already are what you'd like to become. There's a genius in you. You have to treat yourself as if you already were that genius. There's something you're completely capable of. See yourself as already there. Then you'll act upon those thoughts, because the ancestor to every action, said Emerson, is a thought. The next principle is called treasuring your divinity. Treasuring your divinity. There's a wonderful observation that I saw from Emerson in Self-Reliance. It's about trusting your divinity, knowing that you are connected to your source, knowing that you are a divine creation and that there are no accidents. He said, a man should learn to detect and watch that gleam of light which flashes across his mind from within, more than the luster of the firmament of bards and sages. Yet he dismisses without notice his own thought, because it's his own. In every work of genius, we recognize our own rejected thoughts. They come back to us with a certain alienated majesty. We often reject our thoughts, and we see the things that we think of as grand and as genius, and we reject them because they're our own. Treasuring our divinity instead of being terrified of it. Knowing that I am always connected to my source. There is no way that I cannot, because it is in you, and I am in you, and you are in me, and you can never be separated from it. There is no place that this source is not. It grows everybody's fingernails. It beats everybody's hearts. It digests everybody's foods. It opens all the flowers, and you're always connected to it. And finally, the last principle I call wisdom is avoiding all thoughts which weaken you. You know, every thought has an energy, just like everything else in the universe. And if you have a thought of shame, it will weaken your muscles. And what is your heart but a muscle? If you raise a child who believe in shame and feel ashamed of themselves, every time they think that shameful thought, they will be weakened. And if you have a thought of fear, and if you have a thought of stress, and you have a thought of anguish and anxiety, all of these thoughts and many more are the thoughts that will always weaken you. When you are having a thought that you know is disempowering you, shift it. Shift it to one that is empowering rather than disempowering. And the thoughts that empower are thoughts of neutrality and willingness and love, and ultimately thoughts of divinity. And when you see a troubled person who is out there struggling at the highest level of unity consciousness or God consciousness or spiritual consciousness, you recognize yourself in all that you see. There, but for the grace of God, go I. And I am connected to that person. Changing your thoughts. I appeared on the Tonight Show many years ago, several times, quite a few times. And I remember coming home from the Tonight Show, and I was walking along the beach, and they had taped the show the night before, and I was out for a walk, and a woman who lived in the Northeast stopped me, and she said, "Didn't I see you last night on the, how could you be here?" I said, "Well, I flew the red eye, and I was walking along." And she said, "You know, we're moving down here." She said, "What are the people like here? What's it like?" And I said to her, I said, "Well, what are they like where you live?" She said, "Well," she said, I live in a very big city." And she said, "They're very pushy. And people are not very kind. And they don't have time for you." And she said, "It's really not very pleasant." She said, "That's one of the reasons I'm leaving there." I said, "Well, that's pretty much what you're going to find here." That's basically what the people are like here. On the way back on the same day, someone else who had seen me the night before on the Tonight Show, who had lived in the Midwest, stopped me and asked me almost the same question. She said, "You live here?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Well, my husband and I are moving here and we're looking for a school." She said, "What are the people like here? What's it like here?" I said, "What are they like in Chicago where you live?" She said, "Oh," she said, "it's the Midwest." She said, "People are very friendly, they're open, they open their homes to you, they're very loving, they're very kind." She said, "It's a wonderful place." She said, "I love that, I'm going to really miss that." I said, "That's pretty much what you're going to find here." It's what you expect, it's what you think about that expands. It's what Emerson taught us. The ancestor to every action is a thought. Change your thoughts, and you change your world. Change your expectations, and you change around what you begin to manifest and see showing up in your life. If you are what you think about, then you have to start getting real careful about what you think about. Now, you have to start this with being cautious about every conversation that you have with your friends, with your relatives, with your mother, with your husband, with your children, that focuses on what's missing in your life. Because if you want to attract something into your life, something good, something grand, something godlike, something prosperous, something of well-being, you know, health, whatever it might be, if you want to attract that into your life, but you're talking about what's missing and thinking about what's missing, and you understand that what you think about is what expands, you will continue to expand more of what's missing, and you'll continue to attract what's missing in your life. I never talk about what's missing in my life. I only put my attention on what I intend to create. And I have shifted it. And I learned this lesson a long time ago, but the place that it probably expresses it better than any is Esther and Jerry Hicks' book, Ask and It Is Given. The Teachings of Abraham, it's called Learning to Manifest Your Desires, have more than anything, I think they're the greatest, among the really greatest teachings on the planet today. And I know Esther and Jerry, I know them well, I've been with them on many occasions. It's about practicing this idea of not putting your thoughts on what is missing and shifting it to, it's on its way. It's on its way. It's on its way. 4 words, just get them tattooed someplace inside of you. Whatever it is that you would like to attract into your life, know that it's on its way. And I want to say to you that as you begin to get your thoughts more harmonized with Tao thinking, that is, with the thinking of the source, the thinking of God, that which always has been, that which does nothing but leaves nothing undone, as you begin to more and more harmonize in this way, what happens is that you start elevating your thoughts so that the habit of how you think becomes more harmonized. Rather than a polarity with what you want to attract, it becomes harmonized with it, and it becomes your natural way of how you think all the time. And you start then beginning to teach your children the same way of thinking. So you just catch them when they start saying things like, oh, with my luck it won't work out. Why have any of us ever learned to say, with my luck, and having it mean things aren't going to work out? Why wouldn't you say, and just have it as your habit, with my luck, it'll probably show up faster than it normally does? Why not have that kind of a way? Because here's what happens. As you begin to shift the way that you think and have an anticipation that this thing is going to work out for you, you can only act upon your thoughts. And as you get these higher and higher thoughts, what happens is that the thought is now more aligned with what it is you want to attract, and then you start acting upon that thought. And as you start acting upon the thought that it will work out, that it's probably on its way, you start to see how this whole system all works. In other words, call it the universe, whatever you want, begins to conspire with you. It begins to act almost where you suddenly become a collaborator with fate. And instead of fate being something that just might or might not happen to you, you're in collaboration with what it is that you want to attract. I mean, ask any physician, there's physicians here today, ask them about something called the will to live. Ask them about somebody who's going in for a corneal transplant and thinks that I'm going to see when this thing is done, rather than someone who thinks it probably won't work out. And which one would they rather work with? What is this thing called the will to live? What is this thing, this inner kind of thing that says, I refuse to allow myself to think? I say to my mother, who's 90 years old, almost 91 years old. I was with her for the last 5 days, every day, all morning long with her. And she's been going through some difficulties and so on. Most of you saw her on the PBS show, if you saw The Inspiration. She has always said to me how she was going to die. She said it to me when she was 60. What her death was going to look like, when she was going to die in her sleep, and it was going to be, it was going to be a peaceful thing, and she was going to do it when she was ready. When she was ready, she would leave, and she would know when it was time. And she says, don't think it's time. I said, well, you got a hangnail there. Maybe we should just move on with it. And she said, no, I'll tell you when I'm ready. But she has always said, I will never allow Alzheimer's into my life. She's always said that is not something. She'll say things like, well, I can't remember this name quite as well as I did before, but that concept of it's just not anything that I've ever allowed myself to think is a possibility. And I said to her, well, what if you're wrong? She'll say, well, who'll know the difference? And they've done research on this, in studies on gerontology, where what does your life look like from 60 plus? Versus what does your life look like from 60 down into your 20s? That people who live a dynamic life into their 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, people who feel strong, who don't feel that getting older means that I have to in any way decline any place, physically or mentally. Getting older has nothing to do with the concept of declining. That when people are in their 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s, and this is their perception of what their life is going to be like when they're in their 60s, that those people have a much greater chance of not attracting the kinds of diseases that are so much age-related as do people who think of old as infirm and declining throughout their 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. That you change the way you believe about that and you say declining is not a possibility. I don't think about what's missing. You don't put your attention on what's missing. You don't tell other people about what's missing. And you don't tell other people about what you can't do and what isn't working and how terrible the world is. And the Tao teaches so much of it was written for leaders, people in positions of power. But I've translated all of that into your own level of leadership. And the great leaders are the ones who eschew violence. You have got to get yourself to a place where you don't allow yourself to have violent thoughts come into your consciousness. That means you got to watch the movies you're watching. That means the games that your children are playing, video games, have got to be monitored and removed when they have violence built into them. It means that you don't watch the news and you don't read the stories, endlessly reaffirming what a terrible place this world is. It is not a terrible place. It's a perfect place. It's a beautiful place. There are just some leaders who are connected to Tao and others who are not. And we can create the kind of world that we want to create when enough of us begin to say, not part of my consciousness. Nope, I don't buy gossip. No, I don't buy violence. No, I don't have anything to do with that. And you just turn the channel, you turn it off. I pick up a Time magazine when I get on a flight and I go through and I say, I won't read the stories that involve killing. I won't read this. I don't need to hear any more about any more people blowing themselves up. I don't need to continue to have that as a part of my consciousness because I want to be someone who radiates out God-realized thinking. That's what I want to do. And I can't do that if I'm constantly being imbued with that. So I just go through the pages, page. And usually I say, oh, just threw away another $4.95. There's nothing in it to read. Every once in a while, good story about maybe Tiger Woods or something. But by and large, there's not much in there. And you don't have to fill yourself with that kind of energy. So you don't put your thoughts on what's missing. You don't put your thoughts on what always has been. You don't put your thoughts on what others want for you, unless you want more of what others want for you to continue to show up into your life. So that if you're having conflicts with anybody that's out there, you don't have to put your attention on any thought that is out of harmony with the relationship that you would like to have. It doesn't have to be. You can have a love story replace a hate story by just changing your thoughts in any moment of your life. As you'll see, some of you will see it this afternoon, as Katie works with some of you and does the work and teaches you to ask yourself these questions about how can you be sure? How can you be sure that that thought is true? Why not have a love relationship with your ex-husband or your ex-wife? Why not have a love relationship with your in-laws? Why not? Why not have it with everyone on the planet? Why not? Indeed, why not? Every moment of your life, this choice is yours. You can either be a host to God or a hostage to your ego. It's your call. God bless you, and thank you for your attention. Namaste. Thank you. I'll start over. In the universe, there is an unmeasurable, indescribable force which those who live of the source call intention, and that absolutely everything that exists in the entire cosmos is attached to intent by a connecting link. Sorcerers, all of you, that's what you will be when you leave here. Sorcerers, people who live of the source, are not only concerned with understanding and employing that connecting link, but they are especially concerned with cleansing it of the numbing effects brought about by the concerns of living at ordinary levels of consciousness. There is a connecting link between you and everything in this universe is connected to this thing called intention. I'd like to suggest to you that everything that you can look around and see and touch and experience with your senses originated someplace else. You are in this world, folks, but you are not of this world. And you showed up here in this world of form and boundaries and beginnings and ends. You showed up from a field called intention. And you were intended into this universe and into this world by this force field that I'm calling intention. In my new book, The Power of Intention, which is a year or so away from being published, I'm calling intention something that is a future pull that is invisible. Every acorn has intention in it to become an oak tree or whatever it is to become. Every apple blossom that just looks like a little flaky pieces of flowery substance is nothing but the future pull of an apple. And in you, in a tiny little drop of human protoplasm that collided with another one at the moment of your parents getting together, and this thing that we called conception, there was a dot. A tiny little microscopic dot. It happened in a tiny microsecond, a dot. And in that little tiny dot that you can't even see with the naked eye, that you need a microscope to see, in that dot was everything that you were destined to become as a physical being. Your height, your weight, the color of your skin, the color of your eyes, the length of your arms, and the length of everything else, what droops, what doesn't. Everything that was, and here you are, sitting here, watching it, observing it, noticing it, and you know that there's nothing but who you are is nothing but a ghost in the machine. You're watching it and you're observing it, and it's going to go through its paces and do what it was destined to do in the moment of that microscopic dot, right? I'm 6'1". I didn't decide to be 6'1". I have blue eyes. I have hair falling out of my head and growing on my shoulders, my ears, my nose. You have all of these characters. You look at it, you observe it, you notice it, you squeeze the back of your hand. I used to squeeze it, it would snap back. Now I can count how long it takes to get back. And you're watching it and you know. But I'd like to present to you in a few moments a little different view on this thing called intention. I'd like you to take a look at the dot that began you, in which everything that you were destined to become as a physical being. I'd like you to say to yourself this question: where did the dot come from? Where did it come from? You think it came from the sperm of your father and the collision with the egg of your mom? Forget it. It's an illusion. You take that dot, which is your beginnings. A heart starts beating inside of a mother's womb, 6-7 weeks after that moment of conception. And so we take the electron and we pull it out and we put it into an electron microscope and we turn up the magnification. We're just looking for our source. That's all. And we turn up the magnification and we turn it up and up and up and up and we zoom in, and guess what? It's just a whole bunch of particles. Now they call them subatomic particles, but it's mostly just empty spaces with particles all floating around. It's this huge dance. And we take out one of those subatomic particles. This is called quantum physics. This is the study of matter at the subatomic level. What is it like? What happens to matter? And we turn up the magnification as high as we can, and we can now call these things new names. We call them quarks. And we take these quarks, these tiny little subatomic particles that behave in the strangest of ways, because when you look at them and observe them, that changes what they are. At the subatomic level from which all things originate, just the way that we observe something determines whether it will be what it will become. And that's interesting. If we are nothing but subatomic particles in a cell called humanity, the way we look at things literally can impact what it is that we attract or don't attract into our lives. Just the way we look at things. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So we take this little quark and we take it out to Arizona into what they call quantum physics particle accelerators. And we put this quark in a particle accelerator and we rev it up at 250,000 miles an hour in these circular things, and we get these things zipping at each other, and then we collide them. We collide these tiny little, and we open up the particle accelerator to find out what is the source. And we look inside, and guess what's there? Nothing. At the subatomic level, at the tiniest level, there are no particles. In fact, quantum physics teaches us that particles themselves are not responsible for more particles. St. Paul could have told you that 2,000 years ago. That which is seen hath not come from that which doth appear. The source of everything is not in the physical world. So, let's go back to intention. If everything that you were destined to become is in that little microscopic dot, and that microscopic dot originated from something that has no form to it, is it possible that your physiology and everything that you were destined to become was determined in a world in which there is no form before it ever got into form? Why not? That's where it all came from. Now, if everything that you were physically destined to become is in that microscopic dot, and that dot came from the world of spirit, let's call it spirit, then why isn't it possible that everything that you were destined to become that is not in the physical dimension, that is every thought and every emotion and every great expectation that God has of you and everything that you're capable of becoming, why isn't that in there as well? That intention is a field of energy from which you originated, not a set of particles in a moment of conception. And if that's the case, if you can accept that, then you have to say, what does intention look like? What do you think if you had magical binoculars that you could somehow adjust the focus, and you looked over here through these binoculars, and in there you could see the field from which all things emanate? If you could see it, what do you think it would look like? Well, I've just written a whole book about it. And one of those chapters is called The 7 Faces of Intention. I suggest to you that intention has a look to it, that this invisible energy field from which the dot that became you emanated has certain characteristics or qualities. First of all, it is creative. It wants to create. It has to create. Imagine an energy field which is responsible for everything showing up into the physical world, deciding that it didn't want to create. It's too much work, I'm tired, I don't want to do this. It is in a constant state of creativity. It is also, the second quality is that it is everything that it allows to come into the energy field of the world of boundaries. It is kindly toward. Kindness and intention go hand in hand.